The first time I caught her lurking by my side yard, I knew something bad was coming. Her name was Brenda, and she was the president of our HOA, the kind of middle-aged woman who thought a clipboard gave her the right to rule the world. I'm Wyatt Preston, and I had just finished renovating my front porch when Brenda started sniffing around like a bloodhound. "You know, Wyatt," she said, tapping her fake nails against her clipboard, "those porch railings aren't in compliance with Section 4, Paragraph 8 of the HOA guidelines. You'll need to tear them down." I crossed my arms. "They're up to city code, Brenda. I even pulled permits." She gave me a tight, fake smile. "City code doesn't matter here. HOA rules are stricter. You'll be fined if you don't comply." I didn't back down. "Good luck with that." She huffed off, and I thought that would be the end of it. But Brenda wasn't the type to take no for an answer. A week later, my water pressure dropped to almost nothing. I went outside to check, and that's when I found it water bubbling up from a slash in my main line. Someone had taken a knife to the pipe where it ran along the side of my house. I immediately checked my security cameras. Sure enough, there she was, Brenda, in broad daylight, crouched by the pipe with garden shears in hand. I could see the HOA badge swinging from her neck like she thought it made her invisible. My blood boiled. I wasn't just going to let this slide. I called the city inspector right then and there. The city inspector, a wiry man named Edgar Klein with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude, showed up within the hour. He crouched by the broken pipe, examining the damage with a small flashlight while I stood back, arms folded, waiting for his verdict. "This wasn't an accident," Edgar said, rising to his feet. His voice was clipped, professional. "Someone deliberately cut this." I nodded, already pulling up the footage on my phone. Without a word, I handed it over. He studied the video, his brow furrowing deeper the longer he watched. When it ended, he looked at me, the glint in his eye colder than before. "This is felony vandalism," Edgar said. "And because it disrupted your water supply, that bumps it up to criminal tampering with essential utilities." "It's serious." I could feel the tension coil tighter in my chest, but I kept my expression neutral. "What's the next step?" "I'm calling it in," Edgar said. "You'll want to file a police report. And save that footage. It's evidence." He made the call right there from my front yard while I stood by and watched. Within 20 minutes, a squad car rolled up, lights flashing low. Officer Delaney, a solidly built woman with a no-nonsense stare, stepped out and approached us. After Edgar briefed her, Delaney turned to me. "You willing to give a statement and submit the footage formally?" "Absolutely." We sat down at my kitchen table, and I laid everything out for her. The history with Brenda, the intimidation, the threats, and now this. When I handed over my phone, Delaney plugged it into a department-issued tablet and transferred the footage. "I'll be honest with you," she said, scribbling notes. "This is bad for her. Vandalizing private property is one thing. Messing with utilities? That crosses a line. She could be looking at jail time." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Delaney finished taking my statement, promised to keep me updated, and left to track Brenda down. I watched her drive off and let out a long breath, feeling the weight of it settle on my shoulders. But I wasn't about to just sit back and wait. I had a feeling Brenda wouldn't go quietly. Sure enough, the next day, the HOA sent an official letter to my mailbox. It was a thinly veiled threat, a notice of violation for unauthorized exterior modifications, and a demand for immediate removal of my porch upgrades or face escalating fines. I stood in my driveway, reading the letter under the hot afternoon sun, my jaw tightening. Bold move, considering what she'd done. I could almost admire the nerve if it wasn't so disgusting. Instead of reacting, I walked back inside and started gathering paperwork. If Brenda and her cronies wanted to play games, fine. But I was going to play smarter. I dug out every permit I had pulled for the renovations, copies of the HOA's own guidelines, and even the bylaws about board conduct. Buried deep in the fine print was a clause about gross misconduct by any board member being grounds for immediate removal. That night, I went door to door through the neighborhood with a clipboard of my own, a petition to remove Brenda from the HOA board for misconduct and abuse of power. At first, some neighbors were hesitant. Brenda had ruled the HOA with an iron fist for years, and people were scared. But when I showed them the footage, not the vandalism part, just her trespassing and inspecting my property like she owned it, attitude started to shift. "She's been after my backyard fence for months," Mrs. Langston from 2 doors down said, signing the petition with a flourish. "Claimed it was too tall. It's been the same height since I moved in 20 years ago. She fined me $500 for planting marigolds," Mr. Patel from the corner lot added, shaking his head as he signed. By the end of the evening, I had over half the neighborhood's signatures. Enough to trigger a special vote according to the bylaws. The next morning, my phone buzzed. It was Officer Delaney. "We brought Brenda in last night," she said without preamble. She lawyered up pretty fast, but the footage was strong. "She's out on bail now, but charges are pending." I leaned against the kitchen counter, feeling a grim satisfaction settle in. "Thanks for letting me know." "She's not allowed to contact you," Delaney added. "That's part of her bail conditions. If she does, call us immediately." I assured her I would. Later that day, Brenda tried to call an emergency HOA meeting at the community center, probably hoping to spin the situation in her favor before the special vote. I showed up early, the petition tucked under my arm, and took a seat near the front where everyone could see me. Brenda entered in a cream-colored power suit, trying to look composed, but her eyes darted around nervously as more and more residents filed in. The room filled up fast, standing room only. She cleared her throat and launched into a speech about protecting property values and enforcing standards, her voice trembling slightly. I waited until she finished. Then I stood up. "I have a motion to remove Brenda as HOA president for misconduct," I said loud enough for everyone to hear. Murmurs swept through the room. Brenda's face flushed bright red. "You can't," she snapped. "This isn't on the agenda." I held up the bylaws. Section 7, subsection D. Any member can introduce a motion for removal if they have a petition with signatures from at least 40% of homeowners. I dropped the clipboard onto the table in front of her. She stared down at it like it was a snake about to bite. The other board members had no choice but to acknowledge it. We scheduled a special vote for the following week. In the meantime, word about Brenda's arrest spread like wildfire. Copies of the footage somehow found their way onto the neighborhood Facebook page, and suddenly, people who had been too afraid to speak up were coming forward with their own stories. Unauthorized charges on dues, petty fines, harassment, it all poured out. By the time the special vote rolled around, Brenda looked like a ghost of her former self. Only a handful of die-hard loyalists showed up to support her. Everyone else was there to see her fall. The vote wasn't even close. 85% of the homeowners voted to remove her. As she stood there, silent and pale, the vice president, a mild-mannered accountant named Jordan, stepped up to announce that an interim board would be appointed until formal elections could be held. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Brenda packed up her things and left without a word, her head bowed. A few days later, I got a letter from the city prosecutor's office. They were formally charging Brenda with felony vandalism and criminal tampering. She was facing serious consequences, up to 5 years, depending on how the trial went. The neighborhood started to heal after that. We held new elections, and the new board, made up of people who actually cared about the community instead of controlling it, rolled back most of Brenda's ridiculous policies. As for me, I finished my porch renovations without any more interference. Every time I sat out there in the evening, watching the sun dip below the rooftops, it felt like a quiet victory. Justice wasn't always fast, but when it came, it was sweet. A few weeks after Brenda's removal, the neighborhood had a new energy to it. Lawns that had gone brown from spiteful fines were green again. Kids played in driveways without parents worrying about rule infractions. It felt like we had taken our town back from a bad regime. I didn't think much about Brenda after that, assuming she'd keep a low profile while dealing with her legal trouble. But then the letters started showing up. At first, it was just me. A plain white envelope tucked into my mailbox with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed in bold. "This isn't over." No name, no signature, just that. I reported it to Officer Delaney, who added it to the growing file but said it wasn't enough by itself to violate Brenda's bail terms. Then, other neighbors started getting them too. Jordan found one taped to his front door. Mrs. Langston had one slipped under her windshield wiper. It didn't take a detective to connect the dots. At the next HOA meeting, Jordan brought it up in front of everyone. "We need to take this seriously," he said, holding up one of the letters. "This isn't just petty harassment anymore. It's intimidation." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Several neighbors nodded, their faces tight with unease. I caught Mrs. Patel squeezing her husband's hand under the table. I stood and asked, "Can we vote to hire private security? Just until this blows over?" Jordan glanced at the bylaws. With a majority vote, yes. Hands shot up all around the room. It wasn't even close. By the following week, we had a security patrol making rounds at night. A local company staffed with off-duty cops who weren't about to be bullied. Still, none of us were prepared for what happened next. Late one night, around 2 in the morning, I woke to the sound of tires screeching. I bolted upright in bed, heart hammering. I grabbed my phone and rushed to the window. Down the street, a dark SUV was fishtailing, tearing across lawns, smashing into mailboxes. It swerved wildly, clipped Mr. Patel's parked car, and sped off into the night. I threw on some clothes and ran outside. Neighbors were already gathering, some on porches, others in the street. Mr. Patel stood by his dented car, hands on his head. Officer Delaney arrived within minutes, her cruiser's lights flashing red and blue. She took statements while another officer collected debris from the road. I pulled her aside. "This has to be connected to Brenda," I said, lowering my voice. Delaney's mouth tightened. "We're thinking the same thing, but we'll need proof." The next morning, I reviewed my security footage. Sure enough, the SUV had slowed in front of my house before the rampage started. And in the grainy footage, I could just make out the driver's pale, frantic face. It was Brenda. I emailed the footage to Delaney immediately. Within hours, she had a warrant issued for Brenda's arrest. Later that afternoon, Brenda was taken into custody at her sister's house 2 towns over. This time, she wasn't released on bail. The judge considered her a danger to the community and ordered her held until trial. But the damage was deeper than a few broken mailboxes. As Delaney dug deeper, she uncovered something worse. Brenda had been embezzling HOA funds for years. It started small, rounding up invoices, paying herself administrative fees, but over time, it blossomed into tens of thousands of dollars siphoned from the community's dues. She had funded vacations, spa days, even private legal consultations, all under the table. Jordan called an emergency meeting at the community center. "This affects all of us," he said grimly, holding up a thick sheaf of papers. The forensic accountant found nearly $70,000 missing. Gasps filled the room. Mrs. Langston leaned forward, voice shaking. "Can we get it back?" Jordan hesitated. "It'll be a long process. We can file a civil suit, but she's already facing multiple felonies. Restitution will depend on the criminal case." I stood up. "We're not letting this go," I said. "She stole from us. She tried to intimidate us. She vandalized property and endangered lives. We fight back." The room erupted in applause. With the community's blessing, Jordan and I met with a prosecutor named Marissa Holloway, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who didn't waste words. She explained that Brenda would be facing charges of felony vandalism, criminal tampering with utilities, reckless endangerment, and now embezzlement. She's looking at serious time, Marissa said, flipping through the case file. If she's convicted on all counts, it could be up to 15 years. At the preliminary hearing, Brenda shuffled into the courtroom in an orange jumpsuit, wrists shackled. She looked nothing like the imperious woman who once roamed our streets, clipboard in hand. She looked small, defeated. The prosecutor laid out the charges with brutal efficiency. When the judge asked Brenda's lawyer how she would plead, there was a long pause before he muttered, "Not guilty." The judge set a trial date and denied bail again. Outside the courthouse, reporters with cameras waited. Word had spread beyond our little neighborhood. HOA president accused of embezzlement and vandalism made for good headlines. Back home, life moved on. We held fundraisers to cover the legal costs of a civil suit. Bake sales, car washes, even a block party. The turnout was incredible. Neighbors who barely knew each other before now worked side by side, united by what we had endured. At one fundraiser, Mrs. Langston approached me with a smile. "You know," she said, handing me a plate of cookies, "if you ever run for HOA president, you've got my vote." I laughed. I think I've had enough HOA drama for one lifetime. But inside, I felt a swell of pride. We had faced down corruption and intimidation, and we had won. As the trial date approached, Marissa built an airtight case. Between the video evidence, the financial records, and the witness testimonies, Brenda didn't stand a chance. In court, she looked hollowed out, answering questions with barely a whisper. Her defense tried to paint her as overwhelmed, stressed, acting out of desperation. But the evidence was too strong. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning with a unanimous guilty verdict. The judge sentenced Brenda to 11 years, with eligibility for parole after 7. She was also ordered to pay full restitution to the HOA. It wasn't just a victory. It was a statement. No one was above the community. With Brenda gone, the HOA thrived. New policies focused on support rather than punishment. Meetings became potlucks instead of battlegrounds. People planted gardens, hosted barbecues, and finally truly belonged. One evening, sitting on my porch, I watched as neighbors gathered around a bonfire in Mrs. Langston's yard, guitars strumming, laughter echoing into the night. My phone buzzed. A message from Jordan. "Thank you for fighting." I set the phone down, leaned back in my chair, and let the sounds of a healed community wash over me. We had faced the worst, and we had built something better from the ashes. 2 months after Brenda's sentencing, the neighborhood was finally breathing easy. The civil suit against her estate was moving forward steadily, and the new HOA leadership, under Jordan's careful watch, was implementing transparent budgeting and quarterly audits. It felt like we had pulled weeds from a garden, and now the flowers had a chance to bloom. One Saturday morning, I was fixing the hinges on my backyard gate when Mrs. Patel hurried over, clutching a letter. "Wyatt, you need to see this," she said, her voice tight. I wiped my hands on a rag and took the letter. It was from the county clerk's office, addressed to all homeowners in our community. A notice of lien. Brenda had, before her arrest, taken out a large community loan in the HOA's name without proper authorization and defaulted on it. I read the letter twice to be sure, my stomach sinking. If the lien went through, every homeowner would be financially responsible. How did we not know about this? I asked, feeling the old anger stir. Mrs. Patel shook her head. It was hidden. She buried it in fake meeting minutes. Jordan's been digging through the records. Without wasting time, I called an emergency meeting at the community center that evening. Word spread fast, and by sunset, nearly every homeowner was packed into the hall. Jordan arrived carrying a thick binder, his face grim. "She signed off on a $200,000 loan," he announced once everyone settled. She forged signatures from past board members who had already moved away. The bank approved it, because they thought it was legitimate. The room erupted into chaotic shouting. Some people demanded to know if we could fight it. Others looked ready to storm the courthouse themselves. Jordan held up a hand. We have a path forward, but it's complicated. We can petition the court to declare the loan fraudulent. If we succeed, the lien gets voided. But we'll need solid evidence and a formal hearing. I stood up. We've already come this far. We're not letting Brenda's mess destroy everything we rebuilt. Mrs. Langston, who had been quiet until now, added, I'll help gather affidavits. We've got people who can testify she faked those meetings. Jordan nodded. Good. We'll need every piece of evidence. Over the next week, we became a well-oiled machine. Neighbors combed through old emails, text messages, and even social media posts to prove there had never been any meeting to approve the loan. I spent hours at the county records office with Jordan, digging up timestamps that didn't match Brenda's so-called minutes. Meanwhile, Marissa Holloway, the prosecutor who had handled Brenda's criminal case, agreed to assist us in preparing for the civil court hearing. She explained that proving fraud would nullify the lien, but we had to be airtight. The day of the hearing arrived on a gray, drizzly morning. About 30 of us packed into the small county courtroom, sitting shoulder to shoulder in the wooden benches. Across the aisle sat a stiff-faced bank representative, clearly unhappy to be dragged into a public mess. The judge, an older man with bushy eyebrows and a voice like gravel, wasted no time. Marissa laid out our case meticulously. She presented old HOA newsletters that contradicted Brenda's supposed meeting notes. She showed the forged signatures, bringing in a handwriting expert who testified that 2 of the 3 signatures weren't even close to authentic. Then Jordan took the stand. She operated without oversight, he said clearly. She intimidated residents into silence and buried financial decisions in fake paperwork. The bank's lawyer tried to argue that the HOA was still responsible, but Marissa countered sharply. The homeowners were victims of fraud, she said, her voice cutting through the courtroom. They cannot be held accountable for a loan obtained through criminal deception. By the time closing arguments wrapped, it was clear where the momentum lay. The judge took a short recess. When he returned, he didn't waste breath. This court finds that the loan was fraudulently obtained. The lien against the homeowners is nullified effective immediately. Furthermore, the bank may pursue restitution against Brenda Carr directly. Relief broke over the room like a wave. Some neighbors clapped. Others simply sagged in their seats, exhausted but victorious. Outside the courthouse, under the damp afternoon sky, Jordan gathered everyone. We did it, he said simply. No grand speeches. No self-congratulations. Just quiet, shared triumph. Over the next few weeks, things finally settled into a true normal. The HOA rewrote its bylaws, adding strict financial oversight rules. Any loan now required a 2/3 homeowner approval and an independent audit. We also decided to build a small community garden on the empty lot Brenda had once tried to turn into an exclusive dog park for board members only. It felt fitting, planting something new where division had once been sown. One Saturday, as I was helping plant sunflowers by the garden's edge, Jordan walked over, wiping dirt from his hands. You ever think you'd become the neighborhood hero? He asked, half teasing. I leaned on my shovel. I didn't plan on it. I just couldn't watch her ruin what we had. He nodded thoughtfully. Most people would have backed down. Most people aren't stubborn enough, I said with a half grin. Later that evening, after the last of the garden beds were mulched and watered, the community gathered around a fire pit someone had dragged out. People brought folding chairs, coolers of lemonade, and trays of homemade food. Mrs. Langston passed around plates of barbecue. Mr. Patel's kids chased each other with sparklers. Even old Mr. Grady, who hardly ever left his porch, came by with a dusty guitar and strummed a few songs. Someone set off a few fireworks, the bright colors bursting against the night sky, and for a long moment, everything felt right. No more threats. No more fear. Just neighbors, laughing and living. As the fire crackled low and the stars wheeled overhead, I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes for a second, letting the warmth soak in. We had fought harder than we ever thought we would need to. But we had won. And this time it was for keeps.